So Canon sent me their brand new EOS R, and I've been testing it out for a few months, and I'm totally kidding. No one sends me anything because I'm a nobody. But I did rent this camera, and here are my thoughts. So full disclosure, this isn't a technical, comprehensive review of the R5, but more of my hands-on, real-world experience with it. So I took this camera with me on a trek last week, and I pretty much put it through its paces. I tried all the various frame rates and resolutions that this camera has to offer, as well as took a bunch of photographs. And I shot the entire film in C-Log, which is basically Canon's flat picture profile, and it should give me the claimed 13 stops of dynamic range as well as the most amount of flexibility in post-production. Which for the first time I did a round trip between Premiere Pro and DaVinci Resolve, where I did all my editing and exporting in Premiere Pro but did all my color grading and color correction in DaVinci Resolve. And I gotta say, I am just so thrilled by the color grade I got out of this film. And that's in no small part thanks to the 4K 10-bit footage that I was editing. 10-bit color really lets you push and pull the colors in your image and really lets you dial in that specific look that you're going for. One thing to keep in mind though is that if your editing system is not fast enough, this footage will cripple it. File sizes are huge and the codec isn't really optimized for editing. Either that or more likely the editing suites aren't yet optimized for the Canon R5 codec. My system has a 12-core CPU and I didn't see too much trouble, but towards the end of it, after I brought the color graded footage back into Premiere to export, I did see my system slow down a little bit. So if you're thinking about investing in the R5, you should also have a system that can edit those huge heavy files. Okay, so let's now talk about the more controversial and spicy topics regarding the R5, and that's the overheating and the 8K RAW. So personally, I didn't really have any overheating issues when I was using the camera, and I did use it the whole day on the trek. But I was definitely a lot more cautious than I usually am with Canon cameras because of the whole, hype about the fact that these things overheat. So I found myself shutting it off a lot more often than I usually do with other cameras. One of the reasons I suspect I didn't have any issues with the overheating were because of the kind of 4K I was shooting in. So I was shooting the entire vlog in the standard 4K mode in 120p, 60 and 24. Which now brings me to the 8K RAW internal recording. Let me start off by saying that I am super impressed. To be able to get 8K RAW internal recording into a small, relatively inexpensive camera with a full frame sensor, great autofocus, and arguably the best line of native lenses. I mean, 2020 has been a pretty bad year for life and for humanity, but it seems to be a great year for cameras. But for me, that's where it ends. I am impressed that they could do this, but beyond that, for me personally, in my workflow, 8K on this camera is honestly nothing but a gimmick. Let me explain. So for this trek, I took with me two of the brand new CF Express cards, both with 128 gigs of storage. And when I switched the camera over to 8K, it said that I can only shoot 5 minutes on each card. 5. I mean, that's just ridiculous, right? And these cards are also super expensive, so it's a really inefficient, expensive workflow to be buying a bunch of these CF Express cards. And the R5 doesn't let you shoot to something like a Samsung SSD, which is what I do on the Blackmagic, which is a really cost-effective way to shoot and record high-res footage. And things just continue to get worse when you start talking about post-production. If you thought that 4K footage was difficult to work with, this footage is practically impossible. I've watched videos of people having a tough time editing this footage on Mac Pros. At that point, who is this 8K for? If, the pros of the world using professional tools, if they can't get a smooth workflow out of this 8K, then, it's unlikely that you or me are ever going to. And what's funny is that these huge files are in RAW, but the RAW functionality that you get isn't very versatile. Like once you bring it into an NLE like Premiere Pro, there just aren't as many options as say something like Red Code RAW or even Blackmagic RAW. So you're recording to such huge file sizes, but at the same time you don't have the kind of flexibility you get from other codecs which are not as big, are more optimized and have more options. The last issue that I have with the 8K recording in this camera is probably the biggest issue that I have with the 8K recording in this camera, and that's the reliability. So the only time I'm most likely to use something like 8K RAW or even 6K RAW is on professional budgeted projects like corporate films or commercials and stuff like that. And in that case, I need my stuff to be reliable and work as and when I need it to. I can't be worried about overheating and having enough SD cards or CF cards to make it work. When I use something like my Blackmagic, I have a V-mount battery that makes it run the whole day, and I have a 1 TB SSD that stores everything on it. So it's an all-encompassing workhorse that's not going to let me down. And that's something that's super important because you don't want to look like an amateur where your camera goes off in front of like your clients, or you can't keep it on to review the set that you're building or anything like that. So from a cinematography point of view, the 8K is practically useless because you'll have to take a shot, turn it off, wait for it to cool down, and it's not an efficient, practical way to shoot a film. I do want to emphasize that I am basing this on the workflow that I already have when it comes to professional shoots. If you have the resources and the money to make 8K RAW work, then more power to you. And if it helps, Canon recently released a new firmware update where they mentioned that they had put an artificial cap on the cameras themselves because they too were worried about the heating, which they've now removed, and therefore giving you way more time to shoot in 8K before you have to shut the camera off and wait for it to cool down. The final format that you can record in on the R5 is called 4K Fine. It basically takes the 8K footage and downsamples it into a 4K image. And the pro of this is that you don't have the huge file sizes of the 8K, but at the same time, because it's still using that 8K image, you're still gonna overheat the camera in the same amount of time. So if you think that the file size is being smaller but the overheating remaining the same is still a decent trade-off, then maybe this 4K Fine may be the sweet spot to use this camera in. Okay, so the 4K is great, the 8K is a gimmick, right? Who is this camera for? The answer to that question lies in the final aspect of the R5 that I want to talk about, and that's the photography. The Canon R5 is a brilliant photographer's camera. The images are tack sharp, beautiful color reproduction right out of camera, great autofocus, and that beautiful full frame shallow depth of field. I mean, I was using this camera with the EF 24-105 lens, which honestly is not the best lens, and I was using an adapter with it, and I still got tack sharp images with pictures that responded so well in Lightroom. The problem here with this camera has never been the hardware. That's something I've realized. The problem lies in the marketing. Canon marketed this camera as some kind of 8K cinematic workhorse beast that'll, change the film industry for better and for always, which, once you put it to the test, it's really not the case. And that's why people got so mad, because they were expecting something from Canon because of what they said, but they got something totally different. What Canon should have done was say, hey guys, check out this amazing photography camera that also shoots brilliant videography, and as a bonus, we let you shoot short bursts of 8K RAW footage. I mean, automatically when you change the narrative around, this camera sounds so much more appealing, which it actually is. And the route that Canon took with their marketing strategy is a consequence of the current mood of the industry. At this point, people think that more resolution is better, 6K, 8K, even 12K. It's madness. What you need to understand, especially people who are trying to get into the market now or invest in cinematography, videography, is that the Ks don't matter. The important things are image quality, color reproduction, and dynamic range. For example, the Alexa, which is Hollywood's go-to cinema camera, shoots only up to 2K. But everybody wants to shoot on it. Why? Because the image quality is so good, the color reproduction is so good, and the dynamic range is so good. And those are the things that actually matter. So, keep that in mind the next time you're thinking about investing in gear. The Ks don't matter. Except this K, Khaleeli. So finally, who is this camera for? Well, if you're a photographer, especially someone who's in the Canon ecosystem, you're probably coming from the EOS R or maybe even the 5D Mark IV, then this camera is a no-brainer. It's an amazing piece of technology and you shouldn't think twice about it. Pick it up. Even if you're not part of the ecosystem, for a photographer, this camera is unbelievable. And if you're thinking about, beginning your journey as a professional photographer and you don't know what to go with, I've always been a Canon boy, and I will 100% recommend the EOS R5. The other group of people who I think this camera is perfect for, now I know it's going to sound a little niche because I'm literally using one person's name, but in the current space that we're in and the current kind of content that people are creating, I think it's pretty ideal. This camera is perfect for the Peter McKinnons of the world, okay? And what I mean by that is that, you know, people who want brilliant photography for clients and their social media, as well as, you know, produce high quality vlogs and short films on their digital platform. So this kind of gives you the best of both worlds, where you get high quality 4K footage and brilliant photography to be like an all round, you know, just a Peter McKinnon, man. You know, I want to be a Peter McKinnon. Sidetracking. If you're a cinematographer who, you know, works with directors, producers, and you're on set and you need that kind of reliability, then I would not recommend the R5. I would suggest something like the Blackmagic 6K, or if you still want Canon, then maybe the newly released Canon C70. And finally, if you're a run and gun style filmmaker or a vlogger and you just want photography for Instagram and thumbnails, then that's when it becomes a bit of a gray area, and then, you know, there are a lot of other factors that go into making that kind of decision. But honestly, if that's the case, I might actually suggest you buy the Sony a7S III. That is a camera that's not just been built to impress the whole world, but they've taken all the issues that their market originally had and they've fixed all of them. They have a brand new color science, a flip out screen. It seems to be the perfect, you know, guerrilla style filmmaking camera. So if you want a comparison between the R5 and the a7S III, do let me know in the comments down below and I will definitely make that video for y'all. But that's it from me, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it helped you make an informed decision if you are thinking about picking this camera up. I hope I answered any of your real world questions you may have had about this camera. And as always, like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.